I wrote a book, Miss America by Day, 11 years after a newspaper reporter in Denver learned that my father had come into my room from the time I was 5 until I was 18. It was a secret so traumatic that I had blocked it from myself. That's very difficult for people to understand, that you can repress 13 years of the nights of your life. But how could I remember? How could I get up and go to school every day and get A's and be in the choir and be on the ski team if I knew what I was going home to at night and there was no one to help me and there was no way to get out of there? I had to block it, which I did. My youth minister, whom I met the same year I met Larry when I was 15, began seeing me do things that didn't make sense to him, little things. And then pretty soon there'd be something that he just didn't quite understand. And finally, after 9 years, I was 24, after 9 years, he said, I know there is something in your life that is not going well, and I need to find out what that was. And he kept digging until finally he asked a question at the Beverly Hills Hotel. We were having lunch that brought up all of the repressed memories that I had of my father coming into my bedroom at night. If he came into my room one night a week for 13 years, that's over 600 times. It was a trauma I almost did not survive. When the newspaper reporter came forward with the story, and I had a very long recovery, it was very, very hard to come through that. I closed the blinds and I said to Larry, it's over. All the respect that I've built, all the success that I've built, it's over now. It's over. No one will ever look at me the same again. I will be shunned because that's what we believe. The phone rang. And a woman said, you need to have a press conference. And I said, never. I would never have a press conference. And she said, they'll call your mother and your 3 sisters. And I said, what time is the press conference? So I had a press conference, and the next day it was on the front page of the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post. I got a phone call. They're calling your sisters. I called my sister Gwen in San Francisco, and I said, if you want to go public with this, do it in California, because we're never going to get off the front pages in Denver. The next morning, the 3rd day, it was on the front page of the paper again with my sister's story and my picture. I waited until our daughter awakened. She had just come home from her sophomore year in college. She woke up and I said to Larry and Jennifer, I have to get out of here. I have to go. So we put on our sweats and we went to the high school track. We were jogging around the track and the woman with her 2 dogs came. We always said hello. She stopped me. And she said, Marylin, we're so proud of what you're doing. And I'm so grateful. Your sister came forward this morning. I had been upset about that. And I said, really, why? And she said, because yesterday, on our most popular radio talk show, people were calling in and saying, why should we believe her? Now that your sister has come forward, they will have to believe you. I was stunned. I looked at her and I said, if people are not going to believe 53-year-old me, then who is going to believe a child? And that was my life-changing moment. I came home, I called the newspapers, and I called the television stations, and I said, let's get to work. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. The shame was so intense, I believed Larry would never, ever want to look at me again, much less want to marry me. I believed no boy's family would want to marry my daughter Jennifer. I believed no college would accept her if they knew about me. That's the kind of shame that I carried. That's the kind of shame all of us carry. It wasn't until it went public, and it had been 2 weeks, and I was talking to reporters every day. It was on every newscast, it was in the paper, it was just everywhere. And the same reporter, he said, it's been 2 weeks. Has anything changed for you? And I was trying to think of something, and I said, oh, yes, today is the first day I'm talking to you without shame. And that was a big day for me. I have a website so anyone can email me. A woman from New Jersey said, I'm a hospice worker. Last night, a 94-year-old woman asked me to sit on her bed. She wanted to tell me something. Slowly, hauntingly, she said, I have to tell you something I've never been able to tell anyone. When I was 7, I was sexually molested by my cousin, and I had to tell someone before I died. That's how long we carry shame. So one of my missions, at every meeting I ask survivors to stand, and your heart just stops as these men and women start to stand for the first time. They just start standing and letting go of the shame, and they see how many other people are standing. I'm not the only one. I am not the only one. I did a women chamber of commerce. A third of the room stood immediately. Just these women just stood. And then they're looking around and thinking, really? The Denver Post reporter who broke the story, she said nobody had to tell us how many there were. She said, I went to the ladies' room. There was a woman in a fetal position in a stall. She said women had their heads down on their desks. She said, it is so common. We just didn't know. So I have been given the privilege, the gift of being able to impact people's lives. I answer 50 to 100 emails every single day. And on my website, they just start right in. I had a woman that you would know her name so well from government. She just starts, we've never met, she just starts right in. When I was 8, and then she knows she's safe with me, she knows she can trust me, and I email back and forth, and she's going to start her journey. She's 54, and she's starting her journey. I spoke in Aiken, South Carolina last week, and a woman came up and said it was my stepfather. I've never told anyone, not even my sister. And I said, today, you will talk to your sister. And she said, today, I will talk to my sister. It begins. It begins. The healing begins. The most stunning sentence in the book is 14-year-olds comprise the largest number of sex offenders of any age group. When I went to group support, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done, I said to my therapist, I cannot walk into a room with other women. I can't be known. But I was in my late 40s and I was not doing well. I couldn't answer my phone, I couldn't read my mail. You would call it a complete nervous breakdown. It's called recovery. It's a normal way of coming through what I went through as a child. There were 6 women. I'd been violated by my father, another by her mother, another by multiple perpetrators, and 3, 1/2, by older brothers. Well, certainly my pain was worse because it was my father. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't worse. But 14-year-olds don't understand. They don't know that they're causing long-term harm if they inappropriately touch a younger sister or less powerful child. They don't know that. We have to talk to them. I talked to a 15-year-old. She said she's getting her driver's license. She has to take 56 hours of driver's ed and driver's training before she can get a license. 56 hours. How many hours do we spend talking to our teenagers about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate as they grow into their sexuality? They just don't know because we haven't talked to them. We have a playroom, and my grandson Max was 7, and I heard him, they were roughhousing with his friends, and I heard them laughing and giggling. He said, "Don't touch my privates, don't touch my privates." He was kidding, but he also meant it. Now that's all he needs to know at age 7, but we do need to talk to our 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds and teach them about nobody touches our privates, because the average age when sexual abuse begins by an older sibling or older child is age 5. I was 5. We need to teach our 5-year-olds, no one touches our privates. They're just discussions that we have. I get up every morning and go to work because of this. It is my passion. It is my mission. It's why I was put on earth. This is the job I was given. This is why I was named Miss America. This is why I was a motivational speaker. It was all in preparation for doing the job that I was placed on earth to do. I would not have asked for this job, but this is the hand I was dealt, and it is a privilege and a gift to reach out to men and women and educate and role model. I had the honor of being inducted into the East High School Heritage Hall of Fame, and we were asked to go and address students, and we had 2 minutes in which to do that. And there were 1,000 teenagers there, maybe. And I said, when I was at East, I was May Queen. I had the lead in the senior class play. I was in student council. Most of you probably cannot relate to that, but I think you can relate to the fact that when I was your age, my father was coming into my room at night. And when I finished my 2 minutes, they stood up and they applauded and they applauded and they applauded, because this is happening to them. Because in one way or another, it may not be their father, uncle, neighbor. This is a part of their lives. It's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. And we need to talk about it. And that's why they were clapping, is because, yes, they want to be able to talk about the fact that this happened to you too? Really? Oh. And hopefully after the assembly was over, they began to talk among one another, and perhaps they went home and began to talk about it. My father was a very powerful man, and when I was 40, I confronted him. And when he knew why I had come, he left for a very few minutes, and I knew he went to get a gun. I knew he had a gun. I knew he had a gun in his pocket. But I also knew, I was 40, that I was dying a day at a time. My life was very hard at that time, and I knew I had to talk to him about it. And after our conversation, he pulled out the gun, and he said, if you had come in any other way, I would have killed myself. And what he was saying was, if you're thinking about exposing me, then you need to look at what the consequences will be to that. The message was very clear. Terrorized as a child, a very powerful. My mother couldn't even order off the menu. She had to order through my father. He ordered from the waiter. She could not say thank you to the waiter. He would thank the waiter. He just had total and complete power and control. Would people have believed me as a child in Denver, with who my father was in this community? They would not have believed me. There are people who don't believe me today. That's what's so shocking to me. There are people who don't believe me. I'm 74, and there are people who don't believe me. There was no safe place for me as a child. I think each of us has a part. I'm trying to do my part to make this world safer for children, have people believe them, that yes, I believe you. Why would you make this up? I believe you. So many people have asked if my mother knew. I was older than 10 because it was in our new house. My mother always dressed elegantly for bed, and she wore shoes that are called mules. They have a hard heel. My father was in my room. It was 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, and we didn't hear her coming down the long hallway. But when she started down the linoleum steps, I had the maid's quarters, and there were 3 linoleum steps. First, she very slowly went down on the first step, and then very slowly the second step. Everything stopped, and then the third step. All she had to do was take 6 more steps to be at my bedroom door. I knew finally it would be over. And we heard her step again, only she was going back up the steps. And I knew she would never walk through that door. Did my mother know? 13 years, my mother knew. My most difficult time was between the ages of 45 and 50, which is true for most of us. In our midlife, we need to go back and heal the past. And I was 48 when I went to talk to my mother, and I was just sobbing uncontrollably. And when she finally knew what I was saying, and my father had been dead for a year, she said, "I don't believe you. It's in your fantasy." And I thought, if my mother won't believe me when I'm 48, I certainly knew as a child she would never have stood up. Never. She won't even stand up for me now with my father dead. What chance would I have had as a child? I knew as a child. How do you know that? You just know it. You know that it's not safe. There's no one to tell. As we begin to talk more publicly about it, as we begin to discuss it more, it's one of the reasons I wrote Miss America by Day, is to educate so that people have a better understanding, so that someone won't say to a 35-year-old who's just beginning to have to go back and remember what happened to her, "Get over it. It happened. Why are you bringing it up now? This happened 30 years ago." This is textbook. Almost all of us are between 35 and 50 when we have to go back and do the healing work. And once we understand that, once we know that that's normal, I didn't know that that was normal. I didn't know that anybody ever got through. I checked myself into a psychiatric ward. I just thought, does anyone ever get through this? I couldn't find any woman who did. And it's one of the reasons I stepped forward. It's one of the reasons I wrote a book, is because, yes, you can come through it. I needed my mother. I needed my mother at age 48 to say, "I am so sorry," to her death at age 88. She just did not choose that path. I was kind to her death, but she could not say the words that I needed so desperately to hear. We had over 3,000 men and women in the Denver area. They came forward for help and support, 3,000 in 3 months. We had to start an entire organization where we saw 500 people a week at no charge, because men and women were coming forward. They'd never told anybody. And now everybody was talking about it, and so other people were saying, if she can let go of her shame, maybe I can talk to my family. But it's not easy. It's very, very hard. And so we had to find a place. And therapists volunteered their time. We had therapists coming out, "I'll give my time, I'll give my time," as these hundreds of people would come forward and say, "I need help, I need support. We're here, and we can give you that support." When my story came forward, the Kemp Center called. People were calling the Kemp Center. The Kemp Center called me and said, "We cannot take care of these people. We have hundreds of people who are calling." So I called my youth minister, who was retired, and I said, "We need to go to work here." And so he and I started an organization called SUN, Survivor United Network. And that's where men and women would come and go to therapy and have group support. And I would be there, and my youth minister would be there, and therapists would be there. And we did it for 2.5 years. And we took the bulk of the 3,000 people who would come forward and helped them through. When the Denver newspapers covered my story extensively, People magazine called and wanted to do an interview. And she kept coming back for more. And finally she said, "This is going to be a cover story." And the title was something like Miss America Overcomes Shame. And that was when I understood all of it. I looked at it and I thought, Miss America, that's why I'm on the cover. It says shame, because that's what it's about, is shame. Miss America overcomes shame. Whoever wrote that understands exactly what it's about. And that was the day I knew that's why I'd become Miss America. That's why I'd become a motivational speaker, because this was the job. I had actually looked up one day and I said, you know, I want to help, but I can't let anybody know that I am, so how can I help behind the scenes? Anyway, I was getting jobs that were given, that I believe were given to me by a higher power. And when I saw People magazine, I just went, okay, this is the big job, isn't it? This is the big one, okay? All right. There was a woman in Fort Collins. She said, I was at the market. I had a basket full of groceries. And she said, all of a sudden I'm checking out and I saw People magazine, and my story was on the cover of People magazine. She said, I left my groceries in the store. I went into my car and I just started sobbing, and I could not stop sobbing because this had happened to me. And then she came to Denver and became a part of the healing process that we had here. It was really amazing. And we met 4 times a year at Montview Church. And Larry, my husband, would be the greeter at the door. And the first few meetings, everybody's heads are down, everybody's ashamed, nobody's talking to anybody. And after a while, their heads are up, we know their names, they're letting go of shame, and we were able to do in weeks what it took years for us to do, because the whole community was aware and a part of and supportive and engaged. I don't know, but they told me it was one, they know which magazines have sold the most, and it was one of the most highly sold People magazines. And I think the reason why my story became so prominent is because my family was so, I was a debutante. It happens in those families. It doesn't happen in these families. It's like when I ask survivors to stand. I'm sure that it happens in our community, but no one at my table. And then when 3 people at that stand, they're thinking, oh my, this is not only happening in my community, this is happening to my friends and I don't even know it. So we, 1 in 4, 1 in 6, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be violated before the age of 18. Go into a room of 20 people, and we know that when I ask survivors to stand, many, many, many do not, but many do. And it is the most educational part of my talk, because people are saying, when men stand, I had a 65-year-old ex-sheriff stand in Buffalo, New York. And I went up to him after the banquet and I said, I'm so sorry, who was your violator? And he said, my Boy Scout leader. And I said, have you had support? Oh, he said, I've never told anyone. I said, and you chose to stand at a black tie dinner? And he said, I did. And I said, and how does that make you feel? And he said, free. I feel free. When my story became public in May, I received a letter from the Miss America pageant immediately, which said, we hope you have seriously considered the ramifications of what you have just done. About 3 weeks later, the head person called and said, we would like you to be a celebrity judge. They were finding out that people in America were finding that this was okay for Miss America to talk about. We like her. We like what she's doing. So I said, well, I'll come if you say that I'm a sexual abuse survivor as you introduce me on national television. And he said, well, I don't think we could do that. And I said, then I don't think I'm able to come. So I went, and we had a run-through, and they read the text, and it wasn't in there. And I said, excuse me, stop. And I went over to him and I said, we agreed. And he said, I know, but we think this is better. And I said, no, we agreed. And Maria Shriver was doing a documentary on me, so the NBC cameras were on me. And he realized that, and he said, okay, we did agree. So they did. And when I came home the next day, a woman had driven an hour and a half to put a note in my front door, and she wrote, as you were introduced, a huge chunk of shame slid away from all of us. I knew that. That's the power of Miss America. I knew that. And survivors were beginning to speak the words for the first time. It's one of the reasons why being a part of the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame has such special meaning for me. Because when I believed my life was over at 53, in many ways I've been honored for the work that I've done in the area of sexual abuse. And that's just amazing to me and to many thousands of other people, that you would be honored for work that you would do in a field where everybody still is living in too much shame. So I hold my head high. I'm proud of who I am. I am so honored to be a part of the Women's Hall of Fame. I just feel that my life, I've had such an interesting life. And my life has been so blessed. I've been to the lowest of the low, and I've been to the highest of the high. And I'm going to be 75, and I am still going strong.